Sample 13 is a curved seam with a concave and a convex curve. The pieces stitch in together. We're going to overlock our edges, and we're going to do something new called a double turn hem. Your first step is to cut one from sample 13. There are two pieces. So you have this circular piece, and then you have another curved piece that fits into it. You want to make sure that you snip your notches, because this is how we're going to match. And once you've done that, you're going to pay attention to these circles. These are marking pieces, these marking points, I should say. And you're going to go right through the pattern onto your fabric with either a sharp pencil or a pen or a sewing marking pencil. Mark all of that, remove your pins. I've separated my pieces from my pattern, and I've actually marked little X's just so that you can see how this places together. I'm going to sew with my curved piece, my convex piece on the top side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to match my notches on each piece, and I am going to pin. Remember, you're pinning across and not with the seam. I'm going to take my other notch and I'm going to match it to my other piece and pin there. So this seam is actually kind of fighting with each other. It contradicts because you have two different shapes sewing into one. I'm going to begin by matching up where my 1/2 inch seam would meet, and I'm going to pin there. Now I'm going to place my pieces in my machine. I'm going to find my 1/2 inch marking on my seam allowance on my needle plate, and I'm going to place that in there. So this will take a little bit of manipulation. I'm going to start and I'm going to lock my stitch. Remember, you want to remove your pins prior to going to that stitch so that you don't break your needle. And I'm going to go really slow, and I'm going to make sure that my two pieces are lined up. So it takes some practice, and you're going to take your time. And as I move along the seam, I'm going to keep matching, staying on that 1/2 inch. And you'll continue all the way across. When I finish, you can see that I have this circular seam. Before I press it, I'm going to turn it over the other side. I'm going to trim any extra threads that I might have. And I'm going to do something called clipping. And when you have a shape, especially a circular shape, you need to clip your seam, which means you're clipping into your seam allowance so that it can overlap. So if I clip every inch or so, about 3/8 deep, right along the edge. And this allows this seam allowance to lie flat and not interfere with your clean seam. I'm going to press my seam. I'm going to press the seam allowance up toward the smaller circular piece, and I'm going to press it flat. I'm going to turn it over, and I'm also going to press on this side. If you look really closely at your own sample, you'll see that the seam allowance actually overlaps ever so slightly so that it lays flat and it doesn't distort the shape. If you'll notice on this side, you'll see a lot of red thread. I'm only using a contrasting color so that I can show you the method. In reality, whatever you're making, you're going to use a thread that's matching your fabric so that you wouldn't see that. Once I finish stitching, I'm going to press this curved seam up toward the smaller piece. I'm going to turn it over, and you can see where I've clipped the seam, it now overlaps. The seam allowance overlaps, and that allows the curve to lie flat. I'm now going to overlock. So I'm going to take these two seam allowances, keeping the curve in mind, and I'm going to overlock that seam. I'm also going to overlock the 3 outer edges. If you look at our original pattern, we have a fold line for a hem where we notched to make sure that we can figure out that hemline. And it's 1 1/4 inches. So I'm going to look at my piece here, and I've already done so, but you're going to turn this over to the wrong side, and you would have notches at that 1 1/4 inch mark. If you've taken them off with your overlock, just measure up 1 1/4 inches. And what you're going to do is you're going to fold over 1/4 inch and press, and another 1 inch and press. And we're creating a hem here. You're then going to go to your machine, and we're going to stitch this down. I'm going to use a permanent stitch, 2 1/2. I'm going to lock it at the beginning and the end. And I'm going to stitch all the way down. You're going to stay right on that 3/4 marking on your needle plate. Back stitch. And you're finished. You're going to give one more pressing to your seam allowance at the hem, and you'll be finished.